more information about Anthony Kennedy's retirement. He said Justice Kennedy did go to the White House to meet with the president. They spent about half an hour talking, and President Trump said he asked the justice for his recommendations for a replacement. They discussed the fact that there is a list of 25 potential candidates that was created during the Trump campaign. Let's bring in Major Garrett, our chief White House correspondent. Major's joining us from the North Lawn of the White House. Major, for our viewers just joining us, tell us a little bit about this list and its origins.
So it started off as a general list of preferences. I can't remember the exact number when it first came out. I think it was like 13, 14, or 15. Then it became a much more defined list of 20. Then there was one name added, 21, in September or October of 2016. And that's when then candidate Trump said, this is my list. And if I'm elected, the person I nominate to fill the seat of Antonin Scalia will come from this list. Judge me, judge my candidacy, and if you will, judge the future of the court based on this list. As he was president, that list grew to 25, and the president reaffirmed that that list is central to his already established vetting process. And when the president in the East Room of the White House, very early in his presidency, before the end of January, announced Neil Gorsuch as his nominee, he described his selection process, justifiably, as the most transparent in American history. Why? Because never before had there been a list. And that list was followed. Neil Gorsuch was on that second list of 20, then 21. So whoever this nominee is, and the president said the process of vetting the next person has begun immediately, I would anticipate that name being put forth within a week or two at the most, is coming from this list of 25. And then, as the president was asked, well, why not wait to have an intervening election? No, we haven't really thought about that. There's not one chance that this White House or the sympathetic and in solidarity Senate Republican leadership will wait. As soon as the nominee is announced, the confirmation process will begin, and you can be absolutely certain there will be a confirmation vote before the midterm elections to fill the seat, now just made vacant by the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy.
And we heard the president mention that there are some frontrunners that are very well known. He even said that the president of Portugal may know the names of some of those frontrunners, but gave no further details. Now, on to Russia. The president was asked about the upcoming summit with President Putin of Russia. I'm wondering, Major, how much is Russian interference in the U.S. election going to be hanging over this summit, do you think?
It will hang over it for certain. And when the president was asked, what are you going to talk about? Syria, Ukraine, some other things, another golden opportunity for the president to say something about Russian interference in the 2016 election, thoroughly established. There is a body of evidence that is growing in significance, that there is at the margin some mechanisms by which, using the same tactics, Russians are trying to interfere with the conversation about the 2018 election. Not a word said from the president. There are numerous opportunities. This is just the latest, in which he served up on a platter the opportunity to say something. Just recognize it first, criticize it second, about Russian interference in American politics. The president, again, let that opportunity lapse and go by the wayside. So whether they discuss it directly or not, it will overhang because it is a serious issue. It's got bipartisan concern. There are numerous ongoing investigations, some of them just technical and tactical. How did it happen? What were the methods? Some of them with potential criminal aspects to them, the Robert Mueller investigation certainly, about this issue. Lots of people have generalized and very sharp concerns about this, and given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to both note that and to criticize it, President Trump has let almost every one of those opportunities pass him by. What's interesting is it will happen sometime in mid-July on the other side of the president's trip to Belgium for the NATO summit. The two places most likely to be the host, Vienna, Austria, Helsinki, Finland. The people I've talked to believe it's more likely to be in Helsinki, Finland, for geographic reasons, ease of the president getting there, ease of President Putin getting there and then getting back to Russia as the World Cup goes on. So can't say for certain, but I would say if you were to have a hunch, Helsinki, Finland would probably be the place this is likely to be.
And the one thing the president did say on the topic of Russia was simply that they're doing a great job with the World Cup. nothing we heard there about Russian interference. Now, coming back to Justice Kennedy, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said earlier that they'd consider the eventual nominee as early as this fall. What do you make of that timeline, and can Democrats do anything to block this?
They can slow it down a little bit, but they can't block it. That's just a fact. There are some procedural mechanisms by which you can slow things down, gum up the works a little bit. But I guarantee you, if Republicans need to have overnight sessions or weekend sessions just to run out the clock, they'll do it. Whatever is required under Senate procedures to get the hearings held, the vote through the committee, which is the Judiciary Committee, and then the floor vote to have confirmation, Senate Republicans will do it to get this justice on the bench, to replace Kennedy and to have a second Trump person on the Supreme Court, thereby establishing a substantial legacy already before the end of his second year in office, not only on the Supreme Court, but I think Jan made reference to this. If she didn't, I will make the point now. No president in American history has nominated and seen confirmed more appellate justices on the federal bench than President Trump. That is another way in which he is reshaping the federal judiciary, not just at the Supreme Court, but at the appellate courts. And there are lots of Trump nominees that have been submitted and approved for district court positions as well. So already there is a Trump legacy on the federal bench. A second Supreme Court nominee will solidify that legacy even more.
Major, do you think this will embolden the president's policymaking, knowing that two of the justices on the bench were handpicked by him?
I think that's something that Democrats will suggest, and you have to wait and see how things shake out. The president and the Supreme Court decision on the travel ban said something that I think was important, separate from who Donald Trump is and what Donald Trump said about immigration policy. The Supreme Court said long before Donald Trump, the Constitution of the United States invested tremendous authority in the President of the United States and the office of the presidency to deal with immigration policy generally, and very specifically to have wide latitude on questions of immigration policy as they related to national security. The Supreme Court sort of went out of its way to say this was a pre-existing constitutional prerogative of every president. Regardless of who the occupant is now, and regardless of what that occupant said, either as a candidate or as president, this authority has always been there. So the question for the Supreme Court was, did Travel Ban 3.0 fall within that long-established legal authority? The Supreme Court, by a 5-4 narrow majority, I grant you, said yes, it did. So to ask the question, was the president emboldened in the first place? No, he thought he had that problem. He thought he had that power. And it turns out, under the third variation of the travel ban, in fact, he did. If he had tried that on Travel Ban 1 and Travel Ban 2, he would have failed, because the Supreme Court's decision made it pretty clear, though it didn't say so explicitly, neither one of those first two travel ban variations would have passed constitutional scrutiny. So that in itself is an example of how the president didn't necessarily feel emboldened by the existing structure of the Supreme Court and had to rework his own policy. So every president has to look at existing law and the way the Supreme Court has historically dealt with cases. And plenty of presidents have learned that just because you nominate and see confirmed on your watch someone on the Supreme Court doesn't mean they're going to be, and it doesn't mean they ought to be, a reliable vote on behalf of your agenda. Lots of presidents have been burned by that, more of them Republican than Democrat in recent times, but that's always something presidents have in the back of their mind. So I'm not sure I would be prepared to say that the president would or would not feel emboldened. My suggestion is Democrats will make that argument, and it'll be up for the voters to decide whether they believe it or not.
Well, Major, thank you so much for that analysis.